Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. Hello, my beautiful doves. My name is Mina, and on this channel, we talk about fashion, culture, film, and I guess whatever else I want to talk about, which includes today's topic. Okay, also, the sun is currently setting right now as I'm recording this. I don't know why I decided to record this now. Maybe because I'm just like so highly professional and good at my job. But if you notice that the lighting just changes over the course of the video, that is why. Okay, so I made a TikTok about friendship recently and how a lot of my 2024 ins and outs list items have to do with friendship and socialization. And I got a lot of comments from people feeling the same way as I did. So I thought I'd just make a longer video about this topic on Maine. To give the genesis of all this in case you don't follow me on any other platform, shame. My inner dialogue about alienation and loneliness all came together when I read The Friendship Problem, which is a Substack essay by Rosie Spinks. In this essay, she addresses many of the reasons for why people are so lonely today. A lot of it has to do with the usual suspects, capitalism, technology, and social media.
I know it. I know it. I know it.
Then a few other things in the news came up. First, we have the Stanley Cup drama. Stanley Cups are these big insulated drink tumblers that have a cult following, mostly from what it seems like among suburban moms. Anyway, Stanley, the company, collaborated with Starbucks earlier this month on a limited edition winter pink hue that was sold exclusively at Target. And people staked out for this cup. There were long lines that started before the stores even opened, Black Friday-esque style fighting was breaking out, and people were jumping the counters and stealing the drink tumblers. And of course, these Stanley Cups have made it to resale sites, selling for $300 when they originally retailed for $49.95.
Just looks like a huge cup that's way too big. Everybody has one. Why?
That's the first news soundbite. Second, we have the mean preteens of Sephora. So for any non-Americans who may not know, Sephora is a mega retailer of virtually every major beauty brand. Whenever I step into Sephora, it's like that episode of SpongeBob where SpongeBob and Patrick are running through the perfume department. It's just really loud and bright and chaotic. I find it suffocating. Usually I do my Sephora shopping online, so I actually didn't know that there was a problem arising in physical Sephora stores. So the online discourse was started by a TikTok user named Chloe, who posted this video.
Has anyone else noticed that, like, every time you go into Sephora now, it's just all little girls? Like, literally the other day, I was at a mall by my house, and I went in to just grab, I think, nail polish. And I get in line, and there was this cute little girl with her mom. She must have been, I don't know, like 7, maybe 7. Like, and I hear her start yelling at her mom. And her mom told her that she could only get one kind of concealer. Meanwhile, this little girl does not have a single blemish. I don't even think her pores have opened yet. She literally doesn't have a single pimple, under eye bags, nothing. And her mom's like, they're getting concealer for her. And she was literally upset that she couldn't get more than one concealer. I don't know if this is like everywhere lately, but I swear every time I go into these expensive makeup stores, it's just all really young little girls, which is really upsetting to see.
Chloe's video sparked others to talk about their own experiences at Sephora. They rant about how products from viral brands like Drunk Elephant and Sol de Janeiro are always sold out, about how girls are just given free reign with their parents' Amex credit cards, about how 10-year-olds don't need to be buying anti-aging skincare in the first place, which is like a whole nother dystopian topic, and also about how rude many of these preteen patrons are. A lot of it gets brought back to the harms of social media and how these girls are part of the first generation of iPad kids and how we're all screwed. And look, there will always be generational fear towards kids, but I do think there is some truth to the newest generation being raised in a worse environment. It reminds me of this Kyle Fitzpatrick newsletter essay I read a month ago. He wrote, "Shit rolls downhill. In our jobs, more work is placed on us for less money as people at the top seemingly profit off our labor. In our free time, we watch videos and play games and don't have any time to read. We bully each other across generations for whatever reason, resulting in a ridiculous this is in, this is out cycle. We don't have time to have our own lives. We don't have time to parent. Imagine then what it means to be a kid today, to observe and learn and witness all this. Imagine then what becomes of the children who, like any living creature, are a collage of their surroundings. Why would kids be readers or kind when the world we live in is increasingly without readers? We may complain that we want kids to read, yet intellectualism, thinking, and higher education are increasingly being met with contempt and hate. Similarly, we can make the connection that the Stanley Cup fiasco is not necessarily a problem affecting a small demographic of people, but a reflection of today's larger issues. Najma Sharif posted about it on Twitter. Why can't people make the connection between the lack of third spaces and hyperconsumption? These people have no time, few friends, and nothing to do. They're going to collect cups and other things they don't need to feel alive. They're crying out for help. I've made videos referring to overconsumption in the past, and they've mostly focused on brands and influencers, but I'm starting to think that many of us have our own Stanley Cups. Okay, like not like literally, but many of us are plagued with the issue of buying things purely to fill a void, me included.
You do whatever you do to make yourself feel better.
But what I've come to realize is that the antidote to this frivolous overspending and microtrend cycles is less about finding your own personal style, though that's definitely part of it if clothing is your way of overconsuming, if clothing is your Stanley Cup. But the antidote overall is more about finding a community. So, let's discuss. If you've been looking for a way to build a website, look no further than Squarespace. Squarespace is a fantastic platform with tons of customization options and pre-made templates, so you're bound to find something that works with you and your aesthetic. If you're new to HTML or CSS, or if you're like me and don't really have knowledge of either of those, have no fear. Squarespace's Fluid Engine system lets you customize every design detail with this unique drag and drop technology, and you can, of course, use it to design both your websites, desktop, and mobile layouts. They have all kinds of features, so you can really make whatever kind of website you want. You can open a store, you can have a portfolio, or you can just make a website that serves as like a landing page with all your contact information. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Mina to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I've moved around a lot. After high school, I moved to Canada, then to Florida, then to Australia, then to New York, then back home to Maryland, then back to New York again. Long story short, I've started over again and finding and building community relatively more often than some other people, particularly people of my parents' generation, who for the most part stayed in the same place as where they grew up. My parents still have friends from childhood and from college, and I honestly think that's really cool and I'm jealous of them. But that's becoming less of a majority experience as more and more young adults travel around, relocating from city to city. There are systemic reasons for this, of course. Housing is really expensive. Many of us still pay rent at the age our parents were buying property, and if you don't own a house, you have more freedom to move. Or if you're, in my case, you just get a string of really shitty landlords who don't fix anything, which force you to move every year. Many of us also work remote jobs due to the pandemic, which also gives us the freedom to relocate. And then social media and the internet have made the concept of moving much easier. You have hundreds of guides online from travel vloggers and writers who tell you the ins and outs of how to live like a local in another country. You have sites like LinkedIn and Indeed, which allow you to job search in DC while still living in Chicago. And you have social media like Facebook groups and Reddit pages and Discord servers and, Bumble BFF, which dangle in front of you the promise of helping you establish a community in whatever location you decide to move to. And these services, these social media platforms, would make it seem as though it's really easy to set up a new life somewhere. But come on, it's never that easy. And cities, despite being densely populated areas of the world, can also be very isolating places to live. Compare now to New England during the early 19th century, a time that historian Karen Hansen describes as being a very social time. Visitors took afternoon tea, made informal Sunday visits, attended maple sugar parties and cider tastings, stayed for extended visits, offered assistance in giving birth, paid their respects to the family of the deceased, participated in quilting parties, and raised houses and barns. Visits could last anywhere from a brief stopover, or a call, as they called it, to a leisurely afternoon, to a month-long stay. Visitors frequently stayed overnight because traveling was difficult and arduous, especially in the wintertime, and your options for travel were by foot, horse, stage, wagon, or train, which were, not so convenient. But one could argue that because it took so much effort to see someone, contact with your neighbors, friends, and family was extremely valued. But according to Robert Putnam in his book, Bowling Alone, friendship has been on the decline over the course of the 20th century. In the mid to late 1970s, according to the DDB Needham Lifestyle Archive, the average American entertained friends at home about 14 to 15 times a year. By the late 1990s, that figure had fallen to 8 times a year, a decline of 45% in barely 2 decades. Also during this period of time, the fraction of married Americans who say definitely that our whole family usually eats dinner together declined by a third, from about 50% to 34%. According to the General Social Survey, between 1974 and 1998, the frequency with which Americans spend a social evening with someone who lives in your neighborhood fell by about one-third, from about 30 times a year to about 20 times a year among married couples, and from about 50 times a year to about 35 times a year among singles. Part of the reason for this shift is that over the course of the 20th century, leisure started to become privatized. Rich Heyman, an American Studies professor at the University of Texas, told The Atlantic that as living conditions improved, people chose to sit with their nuclear families in front of televisions. But I guess at least the family was still watching TV together. Nowadays, there are people who are all on their separate phones eating at the dinner table. The American Community Life Survey reported last year that only 25% of people living in areas with very high amenity access socialize with strangers at least once a week. COVID-19 has also definitely accelerated the problem. Community and human connection is obviously really important, but I'll explain it further. Putnam talks about the concept of generalized reciprocity in his book. Generalized reciprocity is like raking your leaves before they blow into your neighbor's yard, or lending coins to a stranger at the parking meter, buying a round of drinks for your friends when you got paid overtime, or pet sitting for your friends when they're traveling. It's doing a favor for someone else without the expectation that they'll do a favor for you. But to offer favors requires us to be present enough to notice that there's a stranger struggling to pay their parking meter, or to notice that the senior man living next door needs his backyard raked. My friend lives in the city with her 90-something-year-old grandma, and she tells me that on public transport, people don't automatically offer their seats to her grandma because they're all on their phones and they are not noticing that there's an elderly woman who needs to sit down. But doing tasks for other people is important because it leads to larger community trust, and studies have shown that people who trust their fellow citizens volunteer more often, contribute more to charity, participate more often in politics and community organizations, give blood more frequently, and display many other forms of civic virtue. Something that has been brought up a lot in TikTok discussions is the idea of the third place and how we don't have many of them in America. To recap, the first place is the home, the second place is the work setting, and the third place is a sort of public space that people can gather and socialize on equal footing and with low cost to entry. Think a diner, a cafe, a public park, etc. For those of us who freelance or work for ourselves, we don't even have the second place, we just have one place. Ray Oldenburg introduced the idea of the third place in his 1989 book, The Great Good Place. He writes that third places thrive best in locales where community life is casual, where walking takes people to more destinations than cars, and where there's an interesting diversity of people in the neighborhood. He says, in these habitats, the street is an extension of the home. Attachment to the area and the sense of place that it imparts expand with the individual's walking familiarity with it. In such locales, parents and their children range freely. The streets are not only safe, they invite human connection. This is definitely a more common layout in modern places outside of America, but in America, many homes have no sidewalks out front. People are expected to come and go in the privacy of their cars. And by traveling in a car, people cross an environment without ever becoming part of it, leading us to feel disconnected from our neighbors. If we don't have real third places, what do we have instead? Oldenburg calls what we have as non-places. In real places, a human being is a unique individual person. In non-places, individuality disappears, and you're either a customer, a client, an address to be billed, or a car to be parked. Places have now mostly been reduced to consumerism. Ali Conti wrote for The Atlantic about what she calls ersatz third places, aka establishments that are either too expensive for the average American or apparently designed to disincentivize lingering. Think carefully curated faux dive bars that serve $15 beer and shot specials, or parks like New York's High Line that are built to be moved through in a linear fashion. She also includes co-working spaces or corporate amenities like employee-only coffee shops that give the illusion of an out-of-work place, but are actually constructed to extract more productivity from its workers. For example, if you have an in-office coffee shop, going to get coffee there during your breaks is going to prevent you from leaving the building and taking more time away from your work. She writes, in these privatized third places, there's an expectation that all conversation will be centered on work. There's the underlying anxiety of being on the clock, the antithesis of just hanging out. And the possibility of a wildly unexpected encounter is slim, given that most people in attendance will be in roughly the same socioeconomic stratum because they work in similar jobs. A lot of people realize the follies of the ersatz third places, but have no other choices, especially because city living is so expensive. If you're a New Yorker who wants to be depressed, I suggest reading the Curbed article, How Much Does It Cost to Live Like This?, where basically the reporters interview a number of people on what their ideal lifestyle in New York City would entail and how much that lifestyle would actually cost for them. But overall, according to the Council for Community and Economic Research's Cost of Living Index, living costs in Manhattan are 122% higher than the national average. So even if you don't want to talk about work all the time, living in a city like New York means you have less time to engage in other hobbies because you have to make money or you just can't afford to do the extra hobbies. Ersatz third places can also be expensive, so think Soho House. So people who can't afford to hang out in one of them have to make do with under-maintained bare minimum public places. Oldenburg notes men drinking beers outside convenience stores in the parking lot because there's no seating actually inside the stores, or teens gathering in a local spot in the woods before it gets bulldozed to build more suburban houses. Granted, Oldenburg wrote his book in 2000, so probably the more common third place people visit today is actually social media. With the lack of physical third places, Americans have resorted to investing in their home amenities, so constructing private pools in the backyard, building out movie theaters in their basements, planting a garden, etc. While these things are nice in theory and all things I would personally love to have in my own home, they don't make up for the community aspect that third places offered. Patrick Goldring wrote a social commentary called The Broiler House Society in 1969 and follows the recent history of the chicken. Stay with me. Chickens, before industrial farming, would range freely in the yard, pecking and scratching whenever they please. They had contact with the natural world and were aware of time passing throughout the day and seasons. They were happy little chickens. They enjoyed chickens' rights. But with the introduction of factory farming, most chickens now are hatched and confined under tightly controlled conditions. Climate, time, like night and day, are artificially controlled, and these chickens are barely allowed to move. They eat tasteless food and are overall more stressed than the roaming chicken. Goldring compares the broiler house chicken to a citizen in Britain. He says, broiler house man, living on what is often tasteless and flavorless food, lives a life. Sorry, I'm like, that's such a read towards British food. I've never been to Britain, but like the stereotype is that the food is not that flavorful, right? Lives a life which is increasingly better organized, but is also becoming tasteless and flavorless as his food. The Englishman's home today is not his castle. It is his centrally heated, bright, combined nesting cage and exercise run. The family-sized television replaces the crowded cinema, the bottle of beer from the off-license, the visit to the pub, the telly discussion, the pub argument. Furnishing and decorating the home have become subjects of absorbing interest to the nation, while public architecture has degenerated into a featureless bore. And the more beautiful, or the more personalized we make our home, the uglier our neglected city looks in contrast. And when we associate the home with safety and the public space as being chaotic, dirty, or ugly, it leads us to think of people outside our home, aka our neighbors, as similarly chaotic, dirty, and ugly. Think of the way that the word street has become derogatory. The term street often refers to networks of hostile people and illegal, corrupt activities. As Oldenburg writes, we come dangerously close to the notion that one gets sick in the world beyond one's domicile, and one gets well by retreating from it. Thus, while Germans relax amid the rousing company of the beer garden, or the French recuperate in their animated little bistros, Americans turn to massaging, meditating, jogging, hot tubbing, or escape fiction. While others take full advantage of their freedom to associate, we glorify our freedom not to associate. Again, Oldenburg wrote his book prior to social media, but I think the problem has actually gotten worse because these apps have made it so we're basically always interacting with people online, which eventually leads us to a sense of fatigue. If we spent all morning texting in group chats and commenting on TikTok videos, the idea of rest becomes associated with rotting in bed for the rest of our day by ourselves, not going out to meet more people. The problem, though, is that online social interaction is often not meaningful enough, and I'll actually talk about this later. But going back to the dream house, architect and urban planner Dolores Hayden has written a lot about the dream house replacing the ideal city. She notes that in the decades since 1950, our dream houses got bigger and bigger until Americans enjoyed the largest amount of private housing space per person ever created in the history of urban civilization. In 2016, CNBC reported that there are over 9.4% more bedrooms in the US than people. 357 million bedrooms, but only 323.4 million people. That leaves at least 33.6 million spare rooms. And there are likely even more extra bedrooms since many couples share a room. For people who can't afford to design their dream homes, they rely on curating their social media. It's absolutely not lost to me how many young people and teenagers, an age group that has considerably lower disposable income, unless your parents are the type to promote your Sephora obsession, are so focused on aesthetics and creating online the lifestyle that they actually want offline. What this means for society is that the rich stay comfortable in their homes and the poor suffer from low investments in public spaces. But we all suffer, regardless of income level, in the sense that we lose social skills when we constantly retreat to our homes. And bringing this back to friendship, third place friendships are important because they offer affiliation or casual connection to a group of people. Oldenburg explains that we need both intimacy and affiliation. If we don't have intimacy, affiliation only dulls the ongoing sense of emptiness in our lives. But if we don't have affiliation, then only having intimate human contact makes it feel like all human contact is a burden. What third places offer is an easy meeting point. You could see different people every day that you go, and you don't have to schedule in advance with anyone in particular. If someone cancels on you, you can still go and have a good time. Third places offer the most reliable forms of friendship. There's this Chinese proverb, a humble friend in the same village is better than 16 influential brothers in the royal palace. Basically, it's saying that one of the most important characteristics that friends can possess is availability. Third places make friendship easy, and when we lose them, friendship becomes difficult and high effort.
Can we please be friends? Absolutely.
Friendship has always been difficult for adults. You have more responsibilities as an adult, and once you have a family, you have other humans to take care of and to plan around. And that's really the root of it. There's just too much scheduling and planning in adulthood. And while I'm sure there's some people who are thriving by scheduling time for their friends, scheduling fatigue is a real thing. Relationship expert Shasta Nelson said that regular contact is one of the strongest requirements in any relationship, and without consistency, the relationship will naturally atrophy. Scheduling fatigue can prohibit people from maintaining consistency, which means it makes it harder for people to maintain adult friendships, period. Tori Latham wrote an article for The Atlantic about friend groups who actually share their calendars to make hangout scheduling easier. And if you're kind of a private person like myself, that sounds completely nightmarish. But I guess it does make coordination easier, so you probably end up hanging out with your friends more often than people who don't share calendars. Latham also interviewed long-distance friends who also shared calendars as a way of passively letting each other know what's going on in their lives. Camelia Hart, a long-distance calendar sharer, makes the case. The time that we do have to speak with each other is so precious that I'd rather talk about other things. Having a shared calendar allows us to focus on how the others are feeling or other details. So yeah, in the sense that she's like talking about just wasting time catching up with people by talking about what you've been doing. One of my TikTok commenters actually lamented about how their hangouts have become more about recapping what they've done over experiencing and making new memories together. Having a friendship where you recap with each other isn't inherently bad, but I think it's bad if this is all you do with all your friends. Julie Beck wrote about friendship and delineates 3 different types of friendship: active, dormant, and commemorative. Active friendships are the ones where you keep in touch regularly and can rely on them for emotional support. Dormant friendships are the ones where there's a shared history, so you haven't spoken in a while, but you still consider them a friend. And if either of you reached out, you would meet up, like for sure. A commemorative friend is like a friend you met at a summer camp. They're not someone who's really in your life anymore, not a person you expect to hear from or maybe even like meet ever again, but they were important during an era of your life, and for that, you consider them a friend. Humans have always had these 3 types of friendships. The difference now, though, is with social media, you can keep all these friendships in one place. But by keeping these dormant or commemorative friends too close, it can make us feel overwhelmed, like we have too many friends to keep up with, preventing us from achieving intimacy with like anyone. Honestly, a lot of the relationships we maintain over social media are not intimate. Before social media, you would have to at least call on the phone or physically meet up with a friend to know what they were up to. Nowadays, you can just like scroll through someone's public Instagram stories and it gives you the illusion of maintaining that friendship, even though you didn't actually talk. Marlon Twyman II, a quantitative social scientist at USC Annenberg who specializes in social network analysis, said that social media is powered by the appearance of social connection. He said, human relationships have suffered and their complexity has diminished. Because many of our interactions are now occurring in platforms designed to promote transactional interactions that provide feedback in the form of attention metrics, many people do not have much experience or practice interacting with people in settings where there are collective or communal goals for a larger group. He also adds that this has also led to people being more image conscious and identity focused in real world interactions. Look at the Sephora tweens. As a tween in the 2010s, of course, I cared about image. It's the plague of being a girl. But I was comparing myself to other 12-year-olds at my school, not with the girls and women of all ages all over the world. It's just too much. Another interesting trend as of recent is that people are posting less original content but consuming the same amount of content as before. So rather than consuming your friend or family's content, you're mostly consuming influencer content. This is because, over time, Instagram has encouraged this sort of aesthetic-driven collective consciousness, encouraged by influencers with their carefully curated feeds. But especially over the pandemic, normal people started to post less because they were doing less. Influencer strategist Andrea Casanova said that when people were confined to their homes, the app saw an influx of photos from people who either have a specific lifestyle or had specific talents. This, in turn, reinforces typical people's decisions to not post on their own feeds because they assume the bar for what people want to see is higher. So these photos are all supposed to resemble the best moments of your life. And whether or not you're an influencer, the effects trickle downstream, conveying the message that you shouldn't post unless you have something really spectacular to share or something to sell. And for the most part, if most of our lives revolve between home and work, there's not much to share, is there? So with social media not serving us, what is the online third place? Some will say group chats and forums like Discord act as the new virtual third place, but regardless of wherever it is, an online third place is still limiting in principle.
I never had many friends, and that's sad. And as I've gotten older in this world, it's just gotten more sad.
Okay.
Early last year, there was online discourse on the etiquette behind picking your friends up at the airport. I believe Twitter user Cody Sanchez sparked this discourse with her tweet, "As an adult, don't ask your friends to pick you up from the airport. Use Uber, save a friendship." So before I give my own opinion about this, I think this line of thinking stems from our productivity culture. Speaking of Uber, service apps in general, which are supposed to streamline our own productivity, affect our friendships because they make the idea of helping transactional. If you don't want to go to the grocery store, you can just Instacart and pay an extra fee for someone to shop and deliver groceries to your door. If you need someone to help you move apartments or pick up a piece of furniture you bought from Facebook Marketplace, you can go on TaskRabbit and pay someone to do those things for you. I'm not saying that these apps are net terrible. They do wonders for disabled people and they offer convenience that all of us need sometimes. But I also think these apps can alter the way we view asking for favors. I'm not saying that we should always jump over hurdles for everyone and for everything. Sometimes we would like to help, but we're busy or we don't have money or we're sick. But I think what bothered me about the picking up your friends at the airport discourse is that many people don't like the principle of helping their friends for free. Because when you're used to paying people for services, every act of help feels like payment should be involved. What are you going to do for me? There is no more generalized reciprocity in this context. I also think that with the growth of technology and capitalism, we're told to maximize productivity constantly. We're told we need to be doing the most with the 24 hours of our day. And so spending a few hours helping out a friend with a task when you could be theoretically working towards your side hustle or cleaning your house or reading a book, doing things that correlate with your individual self-improvement. Helping someone else in this context feels like a lot of effort for not a lot of reward.
So if someone's like, hey, can you pick me up from the airport tomorrow? For me, you are asking me to drop thousands of dollars basically to come pick you up. I've already obligated my time, especially in 2-3 weeks out. It's already all spoken for.
But the thing is, it actually is very rewarding. We need these kinds of interactions to build solid friendships and to build trust in other people. We also feel good when we help other people. In a 2017 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, participants' brains were monitored by MRI scans while they made decisions about donating money. When participants chose to donate money, the brain's mesolimbic, I don't know why I'm pointing here, I don't know where the mesolimbic system is, was activated, the same part of the brain that's activated in response to monetary rewards, sex, and other positive stimuli. Choosing to donate also activated the brain's subgenual area, the part of the brain that produces feel-good chemicals like oxytocin that promote social bonding. Another thing people love to say online is you really need to go to therapy, which is sometimes weaponized to mean, your friend, don't want to help you with this situation. Not all the time. I think everyone also objectively would benefit from therapy, and I also think that not everyone is equipped to deal with every single situation that their friend is going through. Like, if my friend is suffering from addiction issues or an eating disorder, I'm not qualified to be the only person that they talk to. But the problem is over-relying on this phrase so that we don't have to hear about or deal with someone else's tough situation at all. Again, I'm not blaming anyone for feeling like a friend in crisis is a lot of work, because it is. But I think that we have a lower tolerance for the work now because we're so overwhelmed and overstimulated by social media and this idea of productivity. We all have work, romantic partners, family members, pets, hobbies, other friends. It's a lot to juggle, made worse by the fact that being online and having 24/7 access to the tragic news cycle makes it so when we're with our friends, we want it to be easy and positive only. But once again, I think that the best friendships arise from struggle, because struggle means there's vulnerability, which means there's trust involved. If your friend held your hair while you were throwing up in the bathroom on a night out, wasted out of your mind, and managed to shuffle you home safely to your bed, that's a deep bonding moment. So, one way we've removed struggle from our friendships is by ghosting people we don't want to be friends with anymore. I think we all like to think that if we don't like someone, the feeling is mutual, or they'll just somehow understand why we don't want to be friends with them anymore. And also, like, I've ghosted people, like, I'm not, like, trying to be holier than thou. I regret it, but I have. Because ghosting is actually really harmful for the other person. Dr. Span notes, ghosting takes away the opportunity to talk and process, which can allow healing. But without conversation, it can cause someone to question their worth, what they did wrong, and if the person ever really liked them. This can lead to trauma and other severe emotions like depression or anxiety. Ghosting is made easier because of the lack of third places. You have a lesser chance of running into someone at a communal place. By the way, I kind of like made another TikTok sort of talking about this. I think the reason a lot of people end up ghosting or like slow fading a friendship rather than actually like putting up with a mess to repair a friendship is because we live in a time when connection is abundant. Some people felt like really upset and they were like, oh, well, you know, I've tried to talk about it with someone, and sometimes ghosting is the only option because it's not clicking. And for me, I think what I'm advocating is not necessarily saying like you have to repair every single friendship, because some people just are not meant to be friends anymore, and that's totally fine. If you've tried to make amends with someone and the message isn't clicking, like that's still an act of trying. I'm really referring to the cases when someone's like, hey, do you want to hang out with me? And in your head, you're like, I don't like this person anymore. Like, this person gives me bad energy or whatever. And you just don't say anything. And there's no like build up to get to this place, if that makes sense. But there's always exceptions for everything. I'm just like speaking in a totally general sense. And also, no one has to listen to anything that I say, ever. Back to communal places. Being trapped in a communal place is actually why kids tend to have better conflict resolution skills. As psychotherapist Esther Perel said, the majority of people learn to play freely on the street. They learned social negotiation. They learned unscripted, unchoreographed, unmonitored interaction with people. They fought, they made rules, they made peace, they made friends, they broke up, they made friends again. They developed social muscles. And the majority of these very same people's children do not play freely on the street. Everything about predictive technologies is basically giving us a form of assisted living. You get it all served in uncomplicated, lack of friction, no obstacles, and you no longer know how to deal with people. Speaking of predictive technologies, even when we do try to solve problems, it can sound AI generated, which is why everyone was making fun of that person trying to set their boundaries with therapy speak.
I've treasured our season of friendship, but we're moving in different directions in life. I don't have the capacity to invest in our friendship any longer.
Algorithmic fragmentation on apps also leads people into echo chambers where they don't have to learn how to talk with people who disagree with them or have different interests. It also gives us the impression that everyone on the internet has the same knowledge that we do, which can lead to a lot of anger and misunderstanding as well. Talking online is literally like the opposite of playing on the street because it only gives you partial connection to someone. You know, we write our comments to someone online. We don't have to look at their response. And so we don't actually see the consequences of our actions. When we're texting someone about an issue, we don't see their physical reaction to this message. One thing I learned in my acting classes is that the close-up shot is so powerful because the audience's connection with the character becomes more intimate when we see everything in their face. 70 to 93% of human communication is nonverbal. Social media also brings a facade of abundance when it comes to intimacy. We're connected to so many strangers on the internet, so theoretically we think we have the ability to make new friends whenever we want. And because of that, we become less invested in repairing a discordant friendship. There's this idea that we can always find someone new. And sure, connection is abundant, but intimacy takes a lot of work to develop. And once again, I'm not saying like you have to keep your toxic, abusive friend or whatever. Like, I'm just saying like in a very general sense, extremely general. I don't even blame everything on social media. Like, social media has made things worse, for sure, for all the reasons that I mentioned. But much of our Social media has made things worse for sure, as for all the reasons that I mentioned, but much of our friendship failings also stem from Western cultural values. We prioritize conflict resolution with romantic partners over our friends because the media and Christian values, which is what a lot of American values are rooted in, emphasize the importance of marriage and family. Happily ever afters show Disney princesses running off into the sunset with their princes while their friends get left behind. And that's also why, social media aside, middle age has always brought more loneliness because people have more family demands during this time that take them away from their friends. Part of my New Year's resolutions was to create more frequent third place meetups with my friends, either at a cafe we all like or a park or something, because it takes the burden out of scheduling in-person hangouts. I know I talked about how America is not third place friendly, but third places do still exist. There's just not as many of them as there were in like the early 20th century. And actually, I came across this podcast episode from On Point where they talk about how third places may be on the rise as an aftermath of quarantine. Jorge Gonzalez Hermoso, research assistant at the Urban Institute's Metropolitan Housing and Communities Policy Center, explains on the pod.
I just wanted to leave us with a little bit more of a positive note that despite all of these closures, we've also seen since 2021 a record in the rate of new business formation in the U.S. So we are creating new businesses at a rate that we hadn't seen in years. Obviously, these not necessarily will become third places because they don't necessarily have to be brick and mortar places, but it's definitely a promising data point that I just wanted to include for us. And going back to your question, definitely the pandemic showed us the importance, for example, of parks, because, you know, as public spaces, we all wanted to be outdoors. For me personally, now picnics at the park was not a thing that I used to do. And now me and my friends, we do it very often, and it's very, very nice. And there's definitely a lot of open-ended questions here, and with other very interesting trends, because we also start seeing, for example, the first and the second place starting to merge, right? We're all working from home. And so I wonder if that also is going to provide a new, we're going to start seeing the third place differently. We're going to think, well, now there's only going to be two places, and this, we really need to pay attention to the second place. Now this being, the public space where we come together. So yeah, the pandemic really brought a lot of changes, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the coming years.
Another thing that I'm trying to do is more experiential stuff with my friends who live near me. So like playing board games together or trying a new recipe together. Also something that I read, I think it was I can't remember if it was Bowling Alone or the Great Good Place. Something that I read was connecting the fact that playing cards with your friends has declined as a social activity because people stopped hanging out with their friends as much. Like, that was just something that people always did. Like, they were like, okay, we're just gonna like play cards or whatever. And card sales like took a huge dive once people started prioritizing their own private leisure. Anyways, I just think it's important to do things other than just reporting about our lives over a restaurant dinner. Again, I think there are multiple kinds of friendship, and so I'm not against the kinds of friends where you just check in with each other. And usually this is what I do with my long distance friends, but I think doing that with all your friendships feels exhausting, and sometimes you just like want to unplug and not think about all the stuff that you've been doing the last couple months. I also think it would be cool to discuss the kinds of boundaries we have with each other. I'm a person who loves a random phone call in the day. I don't always pick up because sometimes I'm like busy or on do not disturb, but I like a random phone call. I also grew up in the suburbs, so people would just call me sometimes and be like, can I come over in 10 minutes? And then just show up at the door, which was really fun and spontaneous. And so if I have a friend now who would do those things, it would make me really happy. I also know a lot of friends who don't like phone calls or who get stressed about entertaining people in their apartments. But I think having these kinds of conversations and knowing what would make a friendship better or worse is important and can only benefit all of us. One of the problems that adults face in their friendships is we're so much more concerned about intruding in other people's space. And so that's why I think we've like lost the practice of just like bursting into your friend's apartment, Seinfeld style, because that's not always going to be wanted by the other person. Which is why I think like establishing our own individual boundaries and like things that make us happy or things that make us uncomfortable is really important and stuff that we should do more regularly because we do it with our romantic partners. And friendships definitely deserve like the same amount of attention, I think. Okay, that's all I have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble. Yeah, thank you. I don't know. Talk to your friends, kiss them, hug them, make plans with them. And I'll see you later. Bye.